Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And it's taken me quite some time to come to the mic to tell it, but I knew it was an important one to tell. So here I am to share his story and mine with you. And it's important that I tell the story of the surviving sibling, the forgotten mourner, the story that is not told enough. So thank you for coming with me on this journey, and thank you for listening to my story. Here I was coming into the second year of the loss of my brother, 2018, and I've let my PI go and have gotten these cryptic messages and gotten little pieces of the puzzle here and there. The detective assigned to the case is so evasive and giving me different stories here and there. When I do get him on the phone, I did get some information here and there from him, as I've shared in previous episodes, but it was nothing concrete. At this point, we're almost 2 years in to the death of my brother. We're coming up on the anniversary, and they still hadn't gone through forensics, and he's telling me that... I almost like to call him dirty detective. I hate to say that, but it is what it is. It was such a exhausting experience for me. And he tells me that basically they still had not sent, the bullet that had been in my brother's. Again, this is a trigger for people sometimes to talk about this, so just giving you guys a warning. This is a little graphic again. But the bullet that had been in my brother's head had still not been sent off to the full forensic situation where they match it to the gun and confirm that it was this particular guy's gun, because there was two involved now that had come out right later that I'd shared with you guys, between this smaller gun and the shotgun and all of the crazy stories I had heard, the variations, even though I really knew what had happened. I mean, let's be real, he was shot with this smaller gun. I at least got that much out of the conversation and that much confirmation out of my conversations with the private investigator, because again, I think he was probably okay at his job. I think he probably just wanted the case for the wrong reasons, and it's disheartening when people are in your life and not supporting you for the right reasons and take advantage of you, especially when you're going through something like this and when you're grieving. It's terrible. I did also, I think we're going to call him Dirty Detective. So with the Dirty Detective, I did also get a confirmation that I remember asking him, I should say it this way. I remember asking him, is anyone else calling? Am I the only one calling? And I'd mentioned in previous episodes that, I knew my mother wasn't calling, and it was only a man that was calling. And of course, he can't say who it was, but there was no other man who would call. Who would it be? It was obviously my father. But it gave me some comfort to know that was happening. But again, I tried to keep calling, and after the last call that I had with him, the detective, his voicemail was full. He kind of just stopped picking up. And I felt defeated. I really did. And I was exhausted. And I'm sure some of you can relate to this. Probably all of you can relate to this. I was so tired because I was not only grieving, I was not only going through this really post-traumatic experience, watching my brother go through, obviously dying, and, this graphic scene I watched, and then being with him, and this intense loss. just very intense. I choke up even saying that still. And I probably always will. And that part, I've accepted about myself. And I hope that you can do that too, because it's okay. I've realized that that's okay. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you strong to open yourself and make yourself vulnerable. But, I was just tired because I was fighting, and I looked behind me, I looked beside me, I looked in front of me, and there was nobody fighting this battle with me. And maybe my dad was, he was, but he was from afar, and we weren't a united front. And that made things so challenging, because it was like, it brought up a whole, slew of confusion and questions for myself too. And in not early 2018, halfway through 2018, I ended up taking a job that was a little just kind of steady Eddie job, because I was tired. I really wanted to kind of just have a steady Eddie kind of sales job and just kind of have a normal life for a little bit, because life had not been normal. And I don't think my life will ever be normal ever again. And again, I'm at a different place with that now, but I think I just wanted to have like a normal life, go back to kind of a corporate-y environment. And I was trying something kind of different. I was like in IT. So it was very random, but I'm always willing to try something new. That's me. And I'm glad I did it, because I ended up meeting my husband. So it was interesting that 2 years in, there was this light that came out of this darkness. And my husband and I ended up becoming like best friends day one. We worked together, and we started dating 3 months later. And long story short, we got married a year later. So that's a part of the story. But in 2018, I was contacted again by my youngest sister. So, after we didn't talk for a while, which was sad after we had the conversation about my mom being at peace, and I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that a mother was at peace, 10, 11 months after their son was murdered. I just was disgusted by the whole thing, and she really couldn't understand me, and I knew that would drive a wedge, and it did. We didn't talk. And I get this call from her, or text from her, because again, she's 10 years younger than me. So I get this text from her that she's graduating, and she was graduating in December. So it was going to be at the end of 2018, and she wanted to catch up. And so I was really happy that she reached out, and we caught up, and I let her know, that I was in a serious relationship and I was seeing someone, and, she was like, I really want you to be there at my graduation. You've been an important part of my life, blah, 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 all that good stuff. It was a beautiful conversation. It was good. And she was excited to see us. And so, that became a positive turn, of course. And I've talked about it on here on other episodes, and I'll continue to talk about it. Grief is ebbs and flows. And I have felt more lows than highs, but because I don't think grieving has highs, but it has moments where you have hope, and that I think it's more like lows and hope. And so this was kind of a moment of hope where I felt like maybe there could be, my sister and I could, get back on track and maybe help each other grieve and reconnect, because she's like more than just my sister. She's like a daughter to me. And it makes me so emotional. And I had felt so alone. But there was this other side where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in this, new relationship. I think we had been together for 6 months at this point when this conversation was happening. And, I think we had known each other for 6 months or something like that. I don't know. I also was going to have to talk to my now husband about a lot of tough stuff, about the family dynamic that he really didn't understand or know. I was going to have to tell him even more about, like, my brother's death. He knew about it, of course, but I really had to tell him about it. And that is a tough moment for us as surviving siblings, is telling someone new in our life, or when we have someone new or significant come into our life. and we have to tell the story. It's reliving it. It's traumatizing, especially prior to the 2-year mark. It was a lot. And so this is an important part of the story for me, for my story, and for my brother's story too. This is our story. And I'm sure there's moments in your story where you remember having to tell certain people. It's like as surviving siblings, when we get asked, like, how many siblings do you have? Oh my God, you guys, I have hated that question for so many years. And now I don't love the question, but I know how to answer it. I know how I'm comfortable answering it now. So you evolve. You never stop grieving, but you evolve. You know how to tackle those things as you continue on your grief journey. Because I'm an open book, of course, I will share what I say. I typically, when people would ask me in the beginning, how many siblings do you have? The first few years, even at this time that I'm talking about right now, in the first 2 years, I would freeze. I was so I didn't know what to say. And I would still say, I'm the oldest of 4. And then they would ask, would you have brothers and sisters? And then I would explain. And then, oh God, I would just dread it so much. Now, 5 years later, going into 6, I still say, I'm the oldest of 4. And I explain my dynamic, and I say, when it comes to my brother, I'm like, I say my brother passed. And a lot of people say, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I just say, it's okay. And I keep a lot of levity about it. And that's how I answer. And that's how I answer right now. It's not okay. I'm not okay. But I think sometimes when people ask me, do you care if I ask how it happened? Things like that. It bothers me. It does. I don't like it. I only am okay with that question once we're a little more than acquaintances, or we're in a support group where we have that dynamic. I'm not okay with someone, if we're just having chit chat and it's someone random in an elevator talk or something, random like that. But if it's someone that I'm trying to, even in a business situation or something like that, I'm totally fine with them asking me. But if it's a very, very surface conversation, it still rubs me the wrong way a little bit, because I'm like, oh, they're just trying to really get the story, or it rubs me. I don't know, but I'm talking about it on an open platform, so I'm very comfortable talking about it now. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt and it doesn't kill me, but I'm in a different place in how I talk about it now and how I feel when I talk about it. It's still painful, but I'm not as uncomfortable. And hopefully that makes sense for you guys as you go through your grief journey. You feel different when you talk about it. You're still hurting. You're still sad. You're always going to be sad and you're still going to hurt. It's just you gain this different strength and perspective through time. And I think you're always strong. If you're making it through this, you have strength the entire time. It's a different form of strength and different form of perspective. And I think you can only understand this if you're going through it. And I think if you're someone listening that's supporting someone going through this, like a parent or a friend, you may understand because you're going through the loss too, but it's an evolution. But to get back on my story, I just think that's a really important question to talk about and go through, because we go through it. But I had to, go deeper than that question. I had to really talk about this with my now husband. And, I had to talk about this with, I had dated, like I said, other people since my brother had passed, but nothing serious. I just didn't feel like I could get there. And even getting there with my now husband was hard because I had so much trauma in my life, and even before my brother passed. But I had done a lot of work on myself, so this was really obviously the forefront and the worst thing I had been through. And I remember I had told him about the death and how he had passed in the homicide and everything, and he knew that I was actively, searching for answers, and he knew that I'd also taken a beat, and I had taken a breath, and I was a little tired. And he also knew, that when he passed, and just important things, and he was very mindful and sensitive to it, which I think was a huge thing to look for when you're looking for someone to support you if you're not in a current relationship, or even if you're looking for friendships and looking who to trust or be open with, or looking who to not have in your life during this time. And looking back on it, I was like, yeah, because he would just listen. And that was really important looking back on it. And I think that's what made us so close so quickly, and why we got married so quickly. I never thought I'd get married, to be honest. And getting emotional over that, because I always wanted my brother to be there, but I believe he was. So I remember my husband, this was significant too, my now husband telling me that he wanted me to meet his family on Thanksgiving for the first time. Okay, so I instantly have a panic attack. I'm like freaking out. I'm like, it's the worst holiday for me. It's the worst holiday for me, with all the family drama that happened 2 years before. On that holiday, right after my brother passed, and now I'm going to meet his family, and the fact that his family is still intact, and then, he's going to meet my family, whatever that means, at my sister's graduation, shortly after, about 2 or 3 weeks after, I think is when he was going to meet them, early December. And I'm like, so all these things are going through my mind, as I'm sure you guys can imagine, listening to this podcast and my story. And I did not want to go, because it was a huge, Thanksgiving get-together, and I didn't know or understand 100% his dynamic. I just knew that his parents had been married for a long time, and I knew that he had a brother, and they weren't, super close, but it was his younger brother. We're both the oldest siblings, but he had a brother. So this was a lot of triggering stuff for me. Parents have been together for a long time. My parents are, on multiple different relationships, as we know from me sharing their stories. And he has a living brother. I was just looking, reflecting back on it. I knew at the time, but reflecting back on it, I'm in such a clear headspace. I was triggered, definitely. And I remember going into this Thanksgiving event, carrying in a bottle of wine, and, my husband is a chef, and so we had a couple things that we brought, and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't do this. I cannot do this. Even 2 years later, I wasn't comfortable. And I ended up connecting very well with his parents, and it was fine. And his relationship with his brother is not close, and so it is not my story to tell there, but I still was, that wasn't super easy to see, but it wasn't as triggering as I thought, because his parents were so pleasant and welcoming, and the family was so wonderful, and I got through it, and I enjoyed myself, and I couldn't, this makes me emotional too, I couldn't believe that, and I was like, okay, if I can do this, it was a milestone for me. It was a milestone for sure. And I remember us driving home, because his family was actually up in Atlanta at the time, visiting family up here, so it was a big thing. And he was, checking on me, asking, were you okay? And I was like, yeah, that was actually okay. That was actually good. I had a really good time, actually. And there was a lot of actuallys in there, because I really didn't know. I had so much fear and anxiety because of those triggers. And I just want to tell that part of the story and part of these integral parts of my relationship that happened, because there is hope for you to find some normalcy, even if there's not normalcy in your own family, or if you feel like you can't open up to those situations again. If I can do that, oh my God, I believe anybody can, because 2 years before was the Thanksgiving from hell. So if I can have, I had a beautiful Thanksgiving. I never in a million years thought that would have happened. And that was definitely a moment of hope for me. Definitely. Sitting there with like our dogs and that huge family. It was really a beautiful moment. And I felt like it gave me permission to kind of, again, feel a little bit. Kind of like how I felt in Mexico, like I could feel a little bit. And so we were going to the graduation for my sister from college. And she's 10 years younger than me, so this is what we're going to. And the fear and anxiety kicks in again because I'm like, okay, I'm going to see my mother and her boyfriend, and I have not seen them since the passing of my brother, since that infamous hotel scene where I walk out and they're all sitting there. I didn't really care so much about seeing my sister and her husband, my other sister who's a year younger than me, and her husband. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'll always have love for my sister. We just don't have a connection like that. But it was more about my mother, because I just don't know how she reacts to things. And she had also been sending me, I guess I hadn't brought this up in previous episodes, but she had been sending me some bonus info. She had been sending me these weird boxes just full of stuff. And some of it was new items, like jackets or clothes, and which is nice and very sweet, and like it would have a note in there. But then she would like include like a picture or something, like one thing of my brother, which, and this had been going on, over the past, year or so, year and a half. She didn't do it like right away. It was like later 2017 she started, or middle. So it was like, a year and a half. And then 2018, so 2017, 2018. And she's sending me these boxes, and I remember doing the unboxings with one of, my closest girlfriend who lost her mother. And it was just, some of the stuff was very kind, some of it was sentimental, and some of it was crazy stuff. And I remember when we were growing up, her mother would do stuff like that, send weird stuff. So it started to get weird. And I know she would write me things like, "We miss you," or "I miss you." And I'm like, okay, like, just pick up the phone. Like, you have my phone number. If you really want to talk about this and hash this out. Like, it was, and I it's not that simple, but she was constantly choosing her boyfriend over in my opinion, the family and the situation, and mourning and grieving and actually dealing with everything. And I thought it was a little delusional that she would just send boxes of clothes and stuff and then just give me one item of my brother's. Because when they left me for that week for all by myself, and when I was alone and I didn't know what was going to happen, I didn't even know if I'd get my brother's ashes, get to go to the ceremony or anything. Here I ended up doing the eulogy, and thank God I got his ashes. Thank God I got to be there. Like, oh my God, it still just tears me inside to know that was something they did. They went into his, residence without me and got all of his stuff and all of his things, and she manipulated that whole situation. And, I never got that opportunity, and she pretended like she was protecting me from that. While in reality, she brought his 21-year-old girlfriend, who, again, I adore, but it was just such a weird and bizarre situation, which I've mentioned before. But so she would just send me these little pieces, and I felt it was very manipulative. So I had all of this kind of like pent up, and I'm telling my now husband on the way down, like, I'm opening up about a lot of this stuff, because I don't think he had seen any of the unboxings. Like, I don't think I put him through any of those. I don't think so. I don't think I wanted to freak him out with that yet. But so the morning of my sister's graduation, we are driving into work. We were driving separately, and I end up getting hit by a 2-ton truck. And I will tell you this right now. I look back on this now because I have a whole different perspective now than I did right after my brother passed, even 2 years in, when I'm talking about right now. It was a terrible accident. I still have physical trauma, and if you guys follow me on social media, you see that I get surgeries and stuff done for it. I still have physical damage because of it. I truly believe that my brother is my guardian angel. I really do. I'm going to get sentimental for a moment. And I hope that you have, believe in God, universe, spirits, something, whatever you believe in, a higher something. But I do hope you believe your loved ones are with you, because I think my brother really protected me that day. I really do. Because when I crawled out of my car that day and then went to the hospital, it was scary to look at my car. But we ended up, my husband, after I was cleared out of the hospital and stuff, he drove me down to the graduation because I didn't want to miss it. I didn't want to miss my little baby graduating college. And I was in so much physical pain. But I didn't realize how much emotional pain I was going to be in as well. So here comes more trauma. I really felt excluded from the family, and I went into it mentally prepared for that. I'm always going to be, I think, ganged up on, with my mother and her boyfriend and my sister and her husband. And that was okay. We went to the graduation, we spent time with my sister, my youngest sister, and her husband, and they came to our hotel and saw us, and it was fine, and we had drinks, and that was good. But then the graduation happened, and we took pictures, and we sat separately. I didn't want to be a part of it. But we then went to dinner, and we had reservations, all of us together. That wasn't going to be weird, right? But I did this for her. You have to do these things, right? You have to. At least I felt compelled to. And we, I kept asking my sister, I'm like, okay, the reservation's at this time. She's like, yes, I think it was 7 or, something normal. And she's like, but we're getting drinks early. I'll text you, I'll let you know. And, time goes by, and I'm sitting there, and I'm on, the anti-inflammatories and stuff they give you at the hospital when you're in this accident and you're injured. And so we're just kind of waiting at this, the hotel, and so we're in Savannah, and so it's not terrible, it's wonderful. And my husband's parents live outside of Savannah, so we had actually, left the dogs there, and so we went there the night of the accident so I could be comfortable. It was just a lot. And now we're in our hotel, and, I was never notified, never told. I was like, let's go to the restaurant. And we get there, and I introduce him to everybody, even though imagine how weird and uncomfortable that was. But I just held my head high because I know the pain that I had been through. It had been over 2 years at that point since my brother had passed. I was fighting for his justice. I was fighting for myself. I was fighting for our family. And so I was not the one that had anything to be ashamed about. And I knew that in my core, even in all the physical pain I was in at the moment and the emotional pain. And so I held my head high. I had nothing to hang it low for. Nothing at all. And I remember staring into my sister's eyes, and I remember staring into my mother's eyes and introducing my now husband. And I think they were just in shock about the situation. I don't know. I'll never know, and I don't care. But we went up to the bar after I did that and got a drink. And my sister, who's a year younger than me, her husband came up to us. And he's jovial and friendly. And he's like, how are you? And Maya, it's so good to see you. And he was so excited to meet my now husband. It was so crazy. And I'm like, I don't know if your wife would be so thrilled about this right now. So it was interesting, and the dinner was fine because we were kind of at 2 separate ends, and we got to be with my youngest sister and her husband. And leaving the dinner is when it got weird. We all took a picture together. I'm a good sport with things like that, but it didn't have to end the way that it did because we were in this private room, and as I was leaving, George, my mother's boyfriend, blocks me from leaving the room. And he's like, we heard you were in a car accident. Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm standing here I'm alive. I'm injured, but I'm alive. Please let me pass. And he's like, well, I just want to let you know, mind you, my mother is standing 2 feet behind him. I just want to let you know that your mother loves you so much. She misses you so much. This is so sad. And he just started rambling on, and I went off. You guys, I went off. I was like, you know what? I was like, she's standing right over there. If she wants to, choice words, talk to me, she can, choice words, talk to me, she can do it. Goodbye. And so I moved out of the way. I'm pretty sure my now husband was like, oh my God, this is like cray. Yes, it was. But then, my sister and her husband and my husband and I, we took them out to a speakeasy and did a little swing dancing. I did not. Obviously, I was sitting on the couch, actually with my sister's husband a little bit at the time, because my now husband was teaching her how to swing dance. So they had a great time. We had a great ending to the trip. So it ended on a really positive note, which was good. But I also had that feeling leaving that like it was so divided that I just didn't feel like I would have that with her again. And it was sad, but I did feel like I needed to be there. And it took a while for like my now husband and I to talk about it, because it was trauma. And he's like, wow, there's, when we did talk about it, because he's not as open about these things as I am. Obviously, I'm on a podcast talking about it, but he realized how much there was to unpack there, and it was a lot, and he had a lot of empathy for me. And I didn't speak to any of them again until April of 2019. And I get these messages from my youngest sister, and she's asking me if I'm going to be in town and if I want to go to the storage unit. And my brother's stuff is in there. It's not just our stuff. There's some of my brother's stuff. I'll never know what's in there or what's not in there. Maybe I will one day. I don't know. I hope. You got to keep hope, but you also can't stay stuck in that kind of hope, right? Is what I feel. That's how I feel about it. If there's things that have been taken from you, you have to stay hopeful about the things that you know for sure. Like, I can't control that my mother took all those things, and I don't know if I'll ever see him again. I have the things that I have, but like they're so much more meaningful, and my brother is with me in spirit, and I know that, and I have to hold on to that when I step back into that moment and share these things with you guys, that I never got to, grab his favorite t-shirt or keep that. And so if you have those things, cherish them so much, because I didn't get those, and it sucks. It really does. But when I got that text, I was like, oh my God. And like, I remember telling my husband, I was like, we were just a couple months away from being married. So I was like, oh my God. I was like, maybe I can get some of this stuff. And so I started asking some questions though, and realizing, wait a second, they've been orchestrating this trip for a while, and they're just telling me like that they're coming like in a day. So once again, I just felt like alone, abandoned, last minute, an afterthought. That was the moment in those messages in April of 2019. Here we were going into like year 3, that I was just like, wow. Like, I felt this so many times, and I had told my husband this, but I was like, I lost my brother physically, and I lost him. But I really lost my whole, like, family. And I really didn't, a lot of it was my choice to walk away from it, because it was so dysfunctional. And I didn't have, like, these strong parental figures in the first place. It wasn't like they were mother and father of the year or anything like that, but like it really just kind of put the final nails in the coffin for it. It was like the final loss, and it was lowered into the ground. And for your parents to just not choose you and just like abandon you like that, it's a loss as well. And I really didn't realize that. And as I've traveled down this journey of loss, there's people that have come to me and sent me messages, and they've listened to my story on social media, because I didn't have this podcast yet, and they reach out and they say, I haven't lost someone to death, but let me share my loss story. And it resonated with me, because I have gone through more than just the loss of my brother. I've lost other people to, death as well, but it was just very tough for me to like understand that. And I was like, and then it clicked with me. I was like, oh my God, I understand what you're going through, because that was loss too. I was just so focused on like a physical like loss, someone physically passing. You've gone through a loss as well when you go through that. And someone consciously choosing not to be, someone in your life. And I realized that I picked to not be a part of the ecosystem, but those people picked to not treat you well. So, you have to protect yourself at a certain point. You have to put the right people around you. And I realized this was all orchestrated. And so finally I asked them, I said, can you guys call me? Like, let's have a conversation. Let's grow up. Like, this is my mother. Like, let's have a conversation. And we did. And it was a very toxic one. They called me, and we were sitting there in the old condo. And my husband and I were sitting there, my now husband, I should say. And they were after dinner, like, because they had to call me back after dinner. And I remember, just being like, guys, what are you doing? And I remember my mom just being so angry. She was very angry. And I, told her, I said, how long have you guys known this? Like, what are you doing? I was having so much anxiety because I thought they were getting rid of all of my childhood stuff. And, like, I didn't know, like, what I was asking her about Andreas' stuff. I said, is there anything in there of Andreas's? Like, I'd like to see it. Like, could I have any of it? Like, anything. And she's like, she loved it because it was, like, the last piece of control she had over me. And she just went off. And I asked her, I said, look, I can't physically just drop everything in a day. Like, I have work, I have a career. At this time, I had just transitioned into a new role. It was like right before I kind of stepped into entrepreneurship, and I started working for an apparel company, and I was over all of their sales domestically and internationally. And so I was in a new big role, and I was like, I can't just like take off. Like, had you guys told me, I would have just put that day in starting this new, role. Like, this is, and they didn't care, obviously. Like, they were just like, no. And I just let my mom have it. I was like, this is ridiculous. I said, you're so disrespectful towards me. And, she started screaming at me, and my youngest sister joined the conversation. And she started screaming and saying, you're so disrespectful to mom. And I mean, it was really brutal. It was really brutal. And I had it on speakerphone, and I let my now husband listen to it. And my mother I don't even remember everything in detail what she said, but it was, she was screaming that I was just such an angry person. I was a terrible person, and just all these things. And I finally fought back. And I remember hanging up in a really bad place with her. And I just looked at him. I was like, that was really bad. And in the conversation, too, I had asked her, if my now husband could come with me to the storage unit to help me, because I couldn't physically do this. I had been in a car accident, not even 6 months prior, 5 months prior. And she's like, no, absolutely not. You can't bring anybody. What? It was weird. It was so bizarre. Control. Stay away from people that just want to control everything all the time. It's just, ugh. And people who want to control everything all the time means that their life is out of control. Just a side note for you as you're grieving. If they want to control your grief, if they want to control how you grieve, if they want to control, I had to learn that. That was a big thing for me, and that took me years. And even in that moment, I don't think I realized, and I was going on year 3, I don't think I was fully conceptualizing or realizing that the reason she was trying to control my grief, she was trying to control who could have access to her and her life and all of these things. And this was my future husband. This is when she had actually met. She had met him. I mean, it was just weird. It means their life is out of control and they're not dealing with their own stuff. That's what's going on there. And I would just add that in there. But I knew at that point, I was like, I don't know when I'll ever speak to any of these people ever again. And I had to sit there in this anxiety just going, oh my God. Like, I had no idea at that point, you guys, if she sold all my childhood stuff, if Andreas even had any of his things in there anymore. I didn't have a clue. I didn't know. I even offered to pay for a storage unit. It didn't matter. I had to play on her terms, her rules. And I'm sure a lot of it was, the feeling of rejection as well. But it's just not how you treat a daughter, and it's not how you treat someone when you're grieving. But I have a deeper understanding of that now, and I hope that helps you guys when you're going through your grief journey. Because again, when someone's out of control and they're not going on their own grief journey, they're going to try to control yours, and they're going to try to control your narrative and how things go. And like, that's just, it's not right, but it's what happens. And I find now that I understand it, I can accept it. And it doesn't mean that it's right, but I can center myself enough to know, okay, you know what? That person's life is really out of control. So that's not about me. That's about them. So that was really tough. That was tough. And, I had to remember that I was in a much better place. And I want to go back. I actually forgot to talk about this because it was interesting to think back. I knew I wasn't going to talk to my family for a long time. I didn't know if ever at that point. And I knew I was still, I was starting to feel refreshed again. And I was fighting the good fight again with my brother. I was starting to look for new private investigators. I was trying to call the detective. His phone was out of, service at this point. It was, non-existent, inbox full, no longer. It didn't even, exist anymore. I was trying to find out, who I could talk to. I started writing to local representatives. I started talking again to new private investigators. It was so challenging. But I want to go back to Thanksgiving and then the dynamic with the graduation, because what was so beautiful, I think, and what kind of set the Thanksgiving up and meeting my now husband's family for more success was the fact that, this is going to make me choke up. My now husband knew how important it was for me to go to where my brother's ashes are. And this is another piece of advice that I would give you guys. I'm feeling very giving advice here, and I'm by no means a counselor, but this is just as my grieving journey went on, all I can tell you from the beginning of my journey is what happened. And all I can tell you kind of at, through the story is the evolution and what I found out and what ends up happening. But at this part of the journey, I can tell you what worked and what helped me and what didn't help me. And what didn't help me is obviously these horrible conversations with my family, the people that didn't support me, and but then also what did help me is starting to understand why they treated me that way and getting some answers to that. And didn't understand right away why that helped me. I didn't understand why understanding the control thing helped me and getting those answers, but I would eventually, and I will share that with you. But to go back to the Thanksgiving and then looking at the graduation versus that, and I have no regrets, by the way, with the graduation. I would kick myself in the butt if I missed that, because again, she's not just my sister, she's a daughter to me. I helped my mother raise her because my dad wasn't around. And right before Thanksgiving was it always is, it's around that time, right? It just depends, because Thanksgiving is always on Thursday, it doesn't matter the date. But it was a Tuesday or something, I think that year was the anniversary of my brother's death. And my now husband made sure that he was there for me that day. And we took the dogs and we went down to the creek where his ashes are. And we brought the champagne and we brought the sunflowers. And we put them in the creek and we put a little bit of champagne in the creek and we drink champagne. And we do that every year. And the very first year, I did that with my friend Michael, and I'm so grateful for him. He lost his mother when he was very young, and he understood my journey in a different way as well. And she's actually, her ashes are buried in the water in the UK. He's from the UK. So he got that. So he was there the first year, and then my husband has been with me ever since then. And then 1 year I've done it by myself. I wanted to do it by myself. That was an evolution. So that was something that was huge for me and really showed me that he wanted to understand it and be a part of it. And I think that looking back on that too, that probably set the Thanksgiving up for a little bit more success to honoring my brother and making him a part of that. So I wanted to make sure that I brought that up too. And I think rituals and just honoring the person and keeping them alive on the physical side for us is so important as a surviving sibling. I really do. I think it is in a positive way. And so I love seeing when people, do the things that I've done or do cool things that I haven't done. I love seeing when people get tattoos like me and do the little rituals like I do, go to the place where his ashes are, and I do the flowers for him. I do as many sunflowers as the years he's passed, and I do champagne. My brother loved some champs. He was always popping some bottles. So I pop a bottle for him. And I think it's really important. And I go there and I think about him and I laugh a little bit. I cry a lot. I feel him with me there. It's very spiritual. And to share that moment with someone is huge. So I definitely wanted to share that with all of you. And if you follow me on social media, I do now share those moments. I'm not afraid. I'm unfiltered. I share those moments, and it took me some time to get there, but I share that, and I'll be sharing that with you because I have my private moments, but I share it. So I hope you guys have those things. And if you don't have those things, make those things for yourself. It helps. It really does. But I knew after that April call, I was hurt. I was really hurt. But I also knew, okay, you know what? I've got the strength to push on. And I did. And I got really tired again because here I was looking for more private investigators. This dirty detective was nowhere to be found. And I was really losing hope, guys. I was losing hope. I thought, this guy who shot my brother, again, trigger warning here if this, talking about this is upsetting to you, you can skip this part or take a breather before, but, the man who literally shot my brother in the face and walked away is walking the streets, and I'm getting, I'd been getting cryptic messages for years, and I'm the only one living in Atlanta. I'm the only one here. God only knows if he knows where I live. It was scary. I was living in fear in a lot of ways, to be even more raw with you. If I can get even more raw. But I want to be such an open book for everyone listening, because I think it's important that we have a voice as surviving siblings. And your story, no two stories are the same. And your sibling may have passed completely different than mine. But I think it's important for you to know that I was scared. I was scared. I had fear. I had hurt. I had pain. I had so many things, and I had zero support from my family. And I had to create my support system. And I remember going through the summer of 2019 feeling I was really consumed with work because this job I had was it was a lot. And there was a lot going on with that job. It was dysfunctional. But I was also working through a lot of emotions. I was in this relationship that was getting very serious, obviously. We're not married. And I was thinking about that too. And I was also thinking about the fact that, I had failed my brother. That's where I was mentally. I was feeling like I had failed my brother. I had gotten to a certain point. I had found out enough evidence. I knew who this guy was. I couldn't get enough information to nail him. I couldn't figure out enough information from these people because they were scared. They all knew he was a bad person. I was confused as to why my brother, trusted this guy enough, but at the same point, I knew my brother enough to know that he wasn't perfect. He definitely had so many flaws. He definitely struggled with drugs and alcohol, and, he just did. He was in pain in this physical world. He was, from a lot of things. But he was a really good person, and one of the things about him was he always saw the good in other people. And he always wanted to believe the best in people. And he wanted to believe the best in people that were not good people. And I knew that. And that kept me in 2019, I was in a state of I was allowing myself to feel, I wasn't on these high doses of these medications anymore or anything like that. And I still took a low dose antidepressant. I still take one. I think it's so important, that we talk about this and we make this normal and keep this open. And I think I will be on one for, a while. Maybe I won't be. I don't know. And I think it's okay to talk about it. But it makes me feel normal and like myself. And that's where I was then. And that's, we'll continue to talk about where I am now. And we'll continue to talk because this is a journey. But I was in a state of beating myself up at that point. I was like, I've failed. I have failed. I've failed myself. I've failed my brother. I have failed perhaps other people, because what if this guy has done this to other people? Because I had heard in those cryptic messages and some calls, that he had done some terrible things to other people and gotten away with it, because technically this guy, from what I knew, didn't have this record, so he'd gotten away with these things. And just because someone doesn't have a record doesn't mean that they haven't done things. I think we all know that. I think we've all watched enough of these murder mystery shows, and it's really, we've watched enough Snapped and things like that to know just because somebody doesn't have a record does not mean that they have not done bad things. And we also know the opposite is true too. Just because somebody has done something bad doesn't mean they're a bad person. Because my brother, he made mistakes in his life. He did. But he didn't kill anybody and walk away and not take responsibility. And that's where I was really struggling. And I felt like I had failed him. And so it was a challenging year for me, because I was like, where do I go from here? And my now husband proposed, and I didn't really ever want a big wedding. That wasn't who I was or anything like that. And I always wanted my brother to walk me down the aisle if I did. And so we kind of we knew I have a thing with the number 8 because it's infinity and it means forever, and it's a good karmical thing. And so we got married a month after we got engaged, basically a year after we started dating. And we just went to the courthouse and had this beautiful day, and it was just us, and it was special. And we only called his parents and let them know, and then we blasted it on social media after we had the day to ourselves. And then it hit me. I think it was that night or the next day. I remembered the dream, and I'm gonna get really choked up. Oh, I remember the dream that I had that I shared with my mom in the hospital, that I had in my 20s, about the past, how my brother was passed. It was this whole flash of a dream about the green Civic that he would have when he was young, which he ended up having. He ended up getting. This was way earlier in my 20s. I had this dream, and I talked about this in earlier episodes. He ended up getting that car. That was the car that he had. Not when he passed, but when he was younger. I dreamed about that car. I dreamed about the place that he lived. I dreamed about my father coming in town, and my father and I having a good relationship and talking about, and my father, the death, and my father being the one there for me. All these things had come true. The last thing in the dream, there were a couple other things, I'm sure details that I'm missing, but the last thing in the dream was this courthouse. And my brother was rushing me to the courthouse, and there was a white dress in the car. I was getting married. I get choked up talking about it. So my brother was there with me that day. I know that. And I couldn't believe that, but I remember recounting the dream to my mother, and she was really not listening to me that day at the hospital, but I was right about everything else, and he was right about how I got married too. And so he was with me that day, and I know I made the right choice about how I got married. And so that gave me some I guess, peace about that year. But that was a challenging year, because that was the year that I was not forgiving myself, and I was not easy on myself or giving myself grace, and I was being so tough on myself because I thought I had to solve all of this and figure this out all on my own. And I thought I failed my brother, but I was so happy to remember that dream. I'm glad it came to me, and I realized that memory, that part of that dream came back to me at the right time, because I needed to give myself a little bit of grace in that moment, because the journey wasn't over. Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.